If you were trapped in a haunted manor for one night, but were hunted down by bloodthirsty ghosts, what would you do? There's no way to escape, so I'm going to break down the mistakes made, what you should do, and how to beat the Death Manor in Deadstream. This man is about to have the scariest night of his life. Sean here is a disgraced YouTuber who fell from fame after a terrible controversy that took away his sponsors and revenue. 6 months later, the man manages to retrieve his channel, posting this video to welcome his viewers back after his hiatus. He tells the audience that over his 7 years of making content, he's faced nearly every fear that is humanly possible, except for his fear of ghosts. For this reason, he's going to livestream himself spending a night at the infamous Death Manor that's known to be haunted by restless spirits. Besides his recording equipment, all he's going to bring are a handful of tools to protect them from the supernatural, and makes it clear to his viewers that he has given himself a rule. If he spots anything unusual, Sean needs to check it out, or else he won't make any money from the live stream. On the night of his stream, he welcomes the audience to Death Manor, the most haunted house in the United States. Before heading inside, he shows off a bracelet that switches the camera with the flick of a wrist, and moves over to his car. He removes the spark plugs from his vehicle, and throws them into the forest so he can't easily escape. This is the first terrible idea of many, and it's about to get a whole lot worse. Sean approaches the manor, explaining that it was built in 1880 by a Mormon pioneer for his daughter called Mildred, but then she tragically died. Supposedly this cursed the house, and 11 more people would die in it before it was boarded up. He also mentions that a body was found here a few years ago and had been eaten alive by rats. Suddenly, he spots a scarecrow that scares the hell out of him, and after he recovers, the man sets up an infrared camera that can detect anything that moves outside. Okay, this guy is an idiot. Sean here has come to one of the most haunted houses in America. Not very many people know where this place is, and he also doesn't have a crew to help him film. To make matters worse, he's exploring an abandoned building that's over a century old, and all these factors combined makes it a very dumb thing to do. It should go without saying that when exploring abandoned buildings in the dead of night, sabotaging your own car would be a huge mistake. Even if we aren't taking the ghost thing seriously, this place is crumbling apart, and he could easily fall through the floor or have part of the ceiling collapse on him. If it were me, I would have made sure to have a friend wait by the car and refuse to let me leave, unless there's a legitimate emergency, in which case, he would be able to drive me to the hospital. While we might get some flack from trolls about needing to use a safety team, the truth is that it's standard practice when you're filming anything that might involve a dangerous stunt or location. We're also in the middle of the woods in Utah, and there are so many things that could go wrong in this situation that sabotaging your only vehicle and taking zero safety precautions is basically a death wish. Now, it's important to point out that even if there aren't any accidents during his night here, the man's ghost hunting kit doesn't make very much sense. He's hunting ghosts, not vampires, so items like a silver dagger and garlic seem to be the wrong tools to do the job. At least he brought holy water, a crucifix, and salt. But if he had studied up on his lore, he would realize that ghosts are supposed to be the wandering souls of dead humans who have been trapped in the physical realm. They're often people who have suffered a great amount of pain in their lives and choose to haunt others so they can experience the same pain. The man does not even understand the threat that he's supposed to be facing, and if I knew for a fact they were out there and wanted to prepare for an encounter with one, I'd replace the garlic with a Bible. Ghosts are proof that an afterlife actually exists, and that means it's possible we could help release the ghosts from their prison by reading them scriptures of repentance and forgiveness. It might sound ridiculous, but so does being haunted by ghosts, and if we aren't fighting them with rules of the supernatural, then we're going to be completely outmatched. With that said, I also wouldn't be limiting myself to a single tradition either. We don't know for sure which religion will work the best, or what tools will be most effective, which is why I'd borrow from as many traditions around the world as possible. He could have easily done some research into how different cultures protect themselves from ghosts, and this would have helped him figure out which tools he needed for the job to make sure he was safe. Sean checks the front entrance to find it barricaded with barbed wire. He decides to look for a different way in and spots another barricaded door. The man uses a crowbar to pry off the wood and gets it open, finding himself inside of the Death Manor. Creeped out, he attaches a padlock to the door and locks it, dropping the key down a floor vent where he can never take it back. Continuing through the house, he looks around and gets scared by the coat rack before apologizing for swearing on camera. That's when he finds his creepy red sign on the wall that says "Help me." Sean calms himself down, insisting that it's just paint, and checks the comments to find out what his audience thinks. He makes his way to the kitchen and takes a look around to find a huge butcher knife hanging on the wall. It's terrifying, and the man tells his audience that he's going to monitor 3 rooms in this house that were all proven to be haunted. He introduces his viewers to the master bedroom and climbs onto a chair to attach an infrared camera to the wall. Sean explains there have been 2 separate incidents involving a spirit called the Corner Man. He reads a note left behind by a former our guest that states he kept having dreams of a very tall man in the corner of his room, whispering the pond water is still, and then a year later, the guest died in his sleep. Sean reads another story from 1995, where a group of paranormal investigators came in and took a photo of this ghostly figure. Freaked out, the man runs out of the master bedroom and responds to the comments, insisting he won't put the spirits to rest. That's when he spots the staircase where Mildred died. Walking up, Sean tells his audience that the town didn't like the girl, so her father built a house in hopes that it might attract a husband for her, but it didn't work. He heads to the next room where there were reports of paranormal sightings, and explains that it used to be a nursery where 5 children had died. Opening the door, he finds the place completely wrecked and notices a curtain with a broken window. He goes over to check it out, discovering that it leads straight outside, and assumes someone must have tried to escape. The man then shows his viewers a video where a ghost hunter tries to convince his daughter to stay in the nursery, but she refuses, explaining that the ghost told her to get out. Moving on to the final haunted area, he enters a disgusting bathroom and tells his audience that another death happened in this worn-down bathtub. Pretending to stick his finger in, he pulls away and places another camera on the wall. He explains that ghost hunters were recording in this room and discovered an electronic voice phenomenon. Playing a video, he reveals that a ghostly voice can be heard saying the words "mama" and "pond water" in the background. It's extremely disturbing, and the live streamer has no idea what he's getting into. Okay, nothing's happened yet, but I'm already terrified, and that's why if it were me, I would have kept a hold of this crowbar. Even if it's useless against the supernatural, at least we'll feel a lot safer, because if I'm letting superstition get the better of me, then it seems pretty clear that this place is packed with ghosts. Now, based on what we've seen so far from this video here, it seems possible that using electronic voice phenomenon, or EVPs, to detect supernatural presence in the room would be a good idea. The problem with them, however, is that EVPs rely on bad microphones to pick up on really quiet sounds and distort the audio. It's also a human's natural tendency to notice patterns and then to assign subjective meaning to them. This is especially potent when the listener is influenced by the subtitles in the mix and expecting to find something meaningful. This is known as priming, where an initial stimulus such as telling someone they're about to hear something spooky will affect how someone reacts to a new stimulus, such as distorted audio. It's a psychological phenomenon that explains how Ouija boards work, since they not only have the slick surface that make it easy to move the ring around, but we expect it to do so without us manipulating it. The truth is that we make tiny unconscious movements that make it seem like it's moving all on its own, so you can very easily trick yourself into thinking ghosts are talking to you when you're really just talking to yourself. With that said, if we remain level-headed and keep superstition out of the equation, there are still a lot of other things we should be worried about finding that aren't related to ghosts at all. For starters, I would expect the chance you might encounter a junkie, considering how many dirty needles are littered here. We might also expect that wild animals are moving through the walls, so jumping at the slightest sound and assuming it's a ghost is misguided. As far as this video he was watching, there are a lot of natural causes that can easily explain everything we're seeing. For example, kids a long time ago died from mysterious illnesses that scientists didn't understand, and it happened pretty often, so 5 dead kids aren't necessarily because it's a haunted house. For the same reason, an elderly gentleman dying in his sleep isn't surprising, whether he claimed to have seen a ghost or not. Lastly, the little girl in this video who refused to go into the room knew they were looking for ghosts, and children are extremely impressionable because their understanding of reality is shaped by the information they get from adults. At this point, everything we found so far has a natural explanation, but soon enough, we'll see that not only are there actual ghosts here, but they're way more dangerous than we ever could have expected. Sean connects the stories together, explaining that both the cornerman and voice from the EVP mentioned the pond water was still, but his fans disagree with his conclusion. Continuing to reveal Mildred's story, he tells them she wrote romantic poems for 8 years about the love she never had until she met an American publisher. They wrote each other letters for years until something happened, and he won't reveal what it is until it's too late. That's when he opens another room up and explains that this will be his hideout for the night. There haven't been any paranormal sightings here, meaning that it should be safe. But that's when Sean spots a closet and decides to check for any ghosts inside. Quickly opening it up, he finds a strange marking on this wood canvas and throws it to the ground. The man picks up his equipment and finishes setting up the safe room by planting another camera. He opens up his bag and takes a swig of an energy drink while talking to his chat, and they demand he provoke the ghost or else they'll stop watching. Sean insists they calm down and whips out a wheel of stupid things to do for the night. He spins the wheel and it lands on a seance. The live streamer leaves the room to try it out while explaining the end of Mildred's story. He tells the viewers that she and her lover exchanged letters for 2 years until the man asked her to marry and move to Boston. But 2 days before she was set to leave, her lover died. Mildred suffered from an intense heartbreak and she died the next day. He moves back to the nursery, telling his viewers the souls of everyone who died in this house are captured by Mildred so she can make a family out of their spirits. The man decides to peek under the bed, finding this creepy doll and placing it on a chair. Sean recites a ritual to the doll while looking around the room to see if anything anything will happen. Suddenly, he hears something hit the roof and sprints out of the nursery, heading back into his safe space. The viewers insist that it was nothing, but Sean admits that he felt a vibration in his chest during the ritual. He pranks the viewers pretending to be possessed, but he doesn't realize that this place will have the last laugh. Okay, this guy is not making good choices. He went into the one room where nothing bad ever happened, found a magic talisman on the wall, and tossed it on the ground without even stopping to do a quick Google search first. If he had looked up hand symbols and their meanings, he would have quickly found a blog post explaining the Hamza as a protective symbol used in Buddhism, Hinduism, and Hebrew cultures, being a symbol that dates back to ancient Mesopotamia. The man would have known that if it was doing anything, it was making him safer. He might still want to break it to ratchet up the tension and boost viewership, but at least he'd be informed of his risks. If, however, his goal is to not end up like the dead people he's talking about, he should probably just leave the Hamza alone. If he wanted to make his safe space even safer, he could have swept the ground like in Shinto, and then used a salt circle around the room to prevent the spirits from coming back inside. Then, he could pray over the area using his crucifix to add another layer of potential protection. He could have also copied the design of the Hamza after doing a little research, and held on to them so he could hang more of them up throughout the house later if he need to. Buddhism and Shintoism are tied together, which means if the Hamza works, then there might be a chance that other Buddhist and Shinto traditions will be effective as well. Now, I have to point out that taking matters into our own hands could be a very risky strategy. Rituals that influence the supernatural realm can be an incredibly useful tool if they actually work. But the problem is that most of us have no idea what the hell we're doing. If you're in the middle of trying to bind or ward off a dangerous supernatural entity and get something wrong in the process, the ghost isn't exactly going to take it easy on you. You're literally imposing restrictions on the entity against its will. And if we don't already have experience in the ritual to make sure we get it right, then it's more likely we're putting ourselves in even more danger. That's why the safest idea is to declare in each room of the house that we are not here to banish them or get in the way of what they want, as long as they grant us safe passage. If they insist on harming us, we can try using the tools we have to ward them off, but it's a much smarter approach to enter this place with respect, because otherwise, we're giving a ghost a good reason to hurt us. We obviously want to make sure the video is interesting, but we don't want to die in the process, so whatever we can do to keep the ghost around without us paying the price is going to be a strategy worth taking. He rambles to the audience while they complain that the stream is getting boring, but that's when the viewers begin sending photos of the quarterman outside his room. Checking the surveillance, he spots a white figure but doesn't believe it's real. Sean pulls out the recorded footage, visibly seeing a white figure walking into the bathroom. Terrified, Sean runs straight into the closet and hides under a blanket, telling his viewers that there's no way he'll head outside. He's too scared to leave his safe zone and confront the ghost. Seeing that his viewers disapprove, Sean decides to take a risk and appease his audience by going to where the ghost was and running back into his safe room. The man takes his protection gear and heads out to face the corner man. He points his flashlight around the hallway and finds the door which he can't remember opening. Suddenly, he hears footsteps behind him and turns around to see nothing there. Looking back at the door, he watches it move by itself. Sean rushes back to his safe room and barricades the door, screaming at the ghost to tell him why it's haunting him. Freaking out, he stomps on the weird hand symbol he found in the closet and breaks it, paranoid that it's attracting the spirits. Suddenly, the door starts opening and he screams in terror when he sees this woman in the hallway. She explains she's a huge fan of Sean's channel and followed him all the way here just to meet the live streamer. He questions how the girl managed to find his location, but tells her to keep it a secret in case more people discover where he's shooting. Suspicious, Sean tries to figure out if the girl has another motive, and Christy admits that she just wanted to say hi, but has experience in ghost hunting that might be of use to him. That's when he picks his bags up and decides to leave the manor. The woman insists that they stay, and the man checks his viewer count to see that the live stream is blowing up. Sean makes a pull to keep the girl around, with most of his viewers agreeing that Christy should tag along. He decides to make the night a tag team effort and hands her a camera to show Christy's POV. They slowly walk outside while Sean orders her to keep an eye on what's behind him. She suggests that they go to the master bedroom, and the man reluctantly agrees. They then walk downstairs towards the bedroom when suddenly Chrissy disappears. Okay, this is terrifying. We've seen a live-streamed proof across the internet that ghosts are real, making it clear that this house is haunted. Sean is in way over his head, and to make matters worse, this superfan has appeared out of nowhere. The girl supposedly figured out where he was and traveled all the way here just to say hi to him in a matter of hours. This is suspicious as hell, but if one thing's clear, it's that we need to be very careful with how we handle this situation. Chrissy here could very likely be insane, but being dismissive of the stalker girl in front of your audience and sending her off alone with no supervision is probably not going to end well. That's why if it were me, I'd keep my distance and never let her leave my line of sight. I don't want her doubling back and ambushing me with this meat cleaver later on. I should also add that to Sean's credit, giving her a camera was a smart move, as it gives him more information to work with. It is also good for boosting views. With that said, I would also have an ulterior motive for keeping her around that isn't just about maintaining appearances to our streaming viewers. We've already started encountering some terrifying paranormal activity, and the longer we stay here, the more clear it seems to be that something dangerous is haunting this place for real. All the tools we brought to protect ourselves might not be enough to prevent this from happening, and with this in mind, it's extremely useful to have someone else around, to make sure that we have a meat shield in front of us if our lives are on the line. Now there's another very strange detail that Sean didn't put enough consideration into, because the girl also said that she claimed to have experience in ghost hunting, and if it were me, I'd definitely want to know more. I'd ask about her experiences, what she found useful, and how long she'd been hunting ghosts. This serves a few purposes. Firstly, it would be better entertainment for the fans, but more importantly, it allows us to get more information from our superfan on whether or not she's made it up. By asking her questions about it, it gives us more of an opportunity to catch her in the lie. The more energy she has to put into expanding on her lie, the more stress she'll suffer and increases the chances for inconsistencies. If she isn't lying about it, that helps us too. She might be sitting on a really useful piece of information or have a special skill we can use to our advantage later when things start to get real. On top of that, it makes her feel valued and appreciated, which means she'll go further to help us in the future. If he had thought to do this, he could have gotten a more complete picture of his situation much earlier on and been able to see what happens next. Freaked out, Sean finds the girl in another corner of the room and scolds Chrissy for scaring him. They walk into the bedroom together and he looks around for something of interest, but that's when the girl screams, telling him that she heard something. He checks out the closet to see a tiny hole under the wall and breaks it apart, finding a secret staircase leading downstairs. They check it out and find an old cellar, where Chrissy discovers something strange. It's a wooden chest left underneath the stairs, and after rummaging inside, the ghost hunters discover a locked box. He checks another compartment to find a book written by Mildred Pratt, the same woman who this house was built for. To his disappointment, it's full of their poems, but that's when they spot a mummified animal on the ground. It freaks them out, and the ghost hunters go running back upstairs. In the bedroom, the viewers beg him to bring out the wheel again, which Sean happily accepts and pulls out of his backpack. He gives Chrissy the opportunity to spin it, and she flicks the arrow, but it lands between two choices, the EVP and spirit board panels. She suggests that they do both, and he reluctantly brings out a Ouija board and a cassette recorder along with these green lights. He orders the girl to put her hand on Mildred's book, asking her to talk with the spirits. Chrissy makes him recite a Latin phrase, and at first the man is resistant, but she convinces him to say it, insisting it's an offering of peace for those trapped in Mildred's house. As soon as they're finished reciting the chant, they hear a loud thud coming from the bathroom. The man is too terrified to investigate what made that sound, but when he takes a look at the chat, he sees everyone call him a wuss for not wanting to check it out. Sean decides to let his fan take a look and watches as she walks off. The man checks his monitoring device, but then he hears strange noises in his room and realizes that he needs to get out. Sean runs upstairs to look for his new partner and gets jump scared by the girl again. Furious, he questions how the girl knows where to hide and asks her if she arrived here before he did. She insists she didn't, but the man doesn't believe her, accusing her of being a stalker. Terrified, he makes it clear that he's going back to the safe room and she's not invited. Suddenly, Chrissy latches onto his neck, biting straight into the man's skin. Sean freaks out, pulling out a sharp piece of wood and defends himself. Opening his eyes, the man realizes that he's just killed the girl for his entire audience to see. Okay, this is super up. Sean here is trying to rebuild his viewer base, and instead, he accidentally commits manslaughter on camera. This has become an absolute disaster, but the truth is that it was completely avoidable. It would have been a lot better to have encouraged her to look around the house away from us, because it gives the audience more to watch without putting us directly in harm's way. This keeps her useful to us without needing to have her around. Someone who stalks you into a haunted house deep in the woods is not a mentally stable person, and we need to make sure we prevent her insanity from bubbling up while we're in the same room. If he had done this, the girl's death wouldn't be on his hands, and he could have continued his live stream blaming everything on the ghosts. Now, with all that said, the girl has been acting weird the entire time, so when she makes suggestions, we can't assume that she's working in our best interest. That's why earlier, when she asked us to repeat her Latin phrase, I would have told her I wanted to try my own strategy first, so that we don't bring out unforeseen unforeseen consequences. Another thing we could do is use our audience and ask them in the chat thread to help us translate the Latin phrase that Chrissy wanted us to recite, just so I'm not accidentally saying something that makes things worse. Normally this wouldn't be an issue, but we have good reasons to be suspicious of her intentions. First of all, she seems really into the evil spirit's bad poetry, was offended when Sean called it bad writing, and also showed up out of nowhere right after the amulet of protection was broken. In a haunted house, that's exactly the kind of thing we can't afford to shrug off as coincidence, and we shouldn't trust this woman with anything. With this in mind, I try using an old samurai method of dealing with evil spirits. Now, the Mubyo-shiryu samurai school swore by its effectiveness in the 16th century, and best of all, it's really easy and fast. When you believe you've encountered an evil spirit, you should first take a moment to clear your mind. Then you make a hand-washing gesture while chanting Hinte Sowaka 3 times. This was believed to force the spirit to show its true form. Finally, you push your hands out in front of you in a stopping motion, with your pointer fingers and thumbs forming a triangle, banishing the evil spirit from your presence. If he had known to use this, then the spirit he released might have been banished, and he would have looked like a total badass in front of his live stream audience. Now, you might be thinking that reciting an ancient Japanese incantation to a Mormon ghost might be a complete waste of time, because they won't understand what we're saying. The problem with this thinking is that in the afterlife, there shouldn't be any strong attachment to a specific culture or religion, because they're now in a new realm that has a completely different set of rules. If something is effective in protecting you from a ghost, it should work regardless of where the ghost came from, because it's being applied to the rules of a world that has existed long before the human race has. Horrified, Sean runs back into the safe room and explains to his chat that there's been an accident, urging them to call the police to his location. After apologizing, he closes his laptop and walks outside to find that the girl's body has disappeared. Suddenly, something stops in the ceiling from above, and the man runs back to his safe room. He checks the hallway camera and spots the ghost of Mildred floating in the air. Freaking out, Sean runs to the closet looking at his chat to find an informational video from his fan. This kid explains that the wooden symbol he found in the closet is known as a hamsa, and it's a charm of protection from evil spirits used by most religions. Now, he's broken it, and the spirits have been let free inside the manor. The chat insists that the ghost would have attacked him already if it could, so he might have a chance to escape. Terrified, he decides to take a risk and walks back out while carefully checking his monitoring device. Suddenly, he's attacked by Mildred and she jumps on his back. The ghost then chokes the man and sticks her finger into his nose. Acting quickly, he slams her into the wall and they fall over before Sean throws the spirit down the staircase. The man rushes to escape, running over her body, and rips the grate off the floor to find the key to the padlock. But that's when he spots blood dripping onto his hand. Reaching up his nostril, he takes a torn-off nail out of his nose and tosses it away. The man realizes he needs to get out of here and pulls out a tiny key from its hiding spot, but figures out this one doesn't go into the padlock. Suddenly, he hears the thud in the distance and quickly picks up a stick as a weapon. But when he checks the other room, he sees that Mildred's body has disappeared. Running back, the man tries to kick this boarded door, but injures his foot. He checks the chat and sees that a viewer suggests he use his new key to open the small box he found. Sean tries it out, realizing that it fits, and finds a photo of Mildred, making him realize that Chrissy was actually the ghost this whole time. That's when he finds his rotten finger inside, and checks his chat for more advice. Someone tells him to pick up the rope and use it to climb down from the upstairs window, but suddenly he hears someone moving. That's when the man peeks around the chair and sees a ghost walking through the hallway. Freaked out, he sprints up the staircase and heads to the nursery to put his plan into action. He fixes the rope around the bedpost, but just as he's tying it around his waist, he spots a child under the blanket. It rushes towards him and the man sprints out of the room, falling onto the ground. He was pulled back by the rope, and Sean quickly unties himself before making his way over to the safe room. Entering the closet, he checks his chat and they insist that he leave, but the man tells them he'll wait for the police to arrive. Sean then finds another video from a fan, and she's translated the Latin he was speaking with Chrissy. The woman reveals he's been tricked, and the chant she made him do actually says, "I give thee my soul and forfeit my will." The video pans over to the fan's daughter, who explains that Mildred is trying to control the minds of those inside the house and make them crazy enough to do something they'll regret. That's when he hears someone call his name and removes a blanket to see Mildred's head right between his legs. The ghost then bites him, but he manages to fight her off and runs out of the room. He heads for the nursery, and with everything to lose, the man jumps out the window to escape the house. He gets back up and realizes his leg is injured. He looks at the wound to see that he's in bad shape. His viewers urge him to clean it, so he takes out the first aid kit and screams in agony while applying the medicine. Okay, this guy is screwed. He's being haunted by Mildred's spirit, who he surrendered his soul to. He probably broke a bone falling on the ground, and now he's stuck in the middle of the woods with no working car. It's a terrifying situation to be in, and if we can't escape quickly, we have basically no chance of survival. Unfortunately, he had the bright idea to lock himself inside and throw away the key. Now, if he had thought to keep his crowbar, he could have easily gone through that padlock, but since he didn't think to do that, his next best move would be to pick up something heavy to bash out these windows. If that doesn't work, a drop from 2 stories wouldn't have been a big deal if he had thought to take off all that heavy equipment and land with a proper parkour roll. It sounds crazy, but a skilled freerunner can survive a 28-foot drop using these falling techniques, so there was a chance he could literally have rolled away from the situation with minimal injury. The other option he has is duct taping the Hamza back together. We don't know if this would work, and there's a good chance it wouldn't do anything, but at this point, it's worth a shot. Now, another thing to consider is that he hasn't tested if the salt works in this ghost. If he brought enough of it, he could potentially use it to make barriers that the ghost can't cross. This might have given him an opening to attack it with the holy water, silver dagger, or even the meat cleaver. While it won't put her down for good, it might put her down long enough to fully trap her, or at the very least, give us enough space to then safely retreat. Putting these all together, before she attacked him in the hallway, he could have placed a line of salt and then stabbed her with the silver dagger. Then, after forming a circle of salt around her body to keep her contained, the man would have had enough time to take off his heavy equipment and used a parkour roll to safely land for the second-story window. Then, it's a simple matter of running like hell, and at this point, I think his sponsors will understand. Sean hears a noise from upstairs and decides to rush back into his car, but remembers that he left his spark plugs in the forest. The man looks around and finds them lying on the ground. That's when he sees another demonic spirit and runs out of the forest, falling over. Suddenly, a police officer calls his name and he jumps up to hug the man, telling him they need to leave now. The officer informs him that he's been watching his live stream and scolds him in a demonic voice for killing Chrissy. He's a ghost too, and Sean kicks him between the legs before rushing back to his car. Terrified, he tries to look outside, but realizes that he can't see a thing. That's when he attaches this night vision camera to a Slim Jim and pokes the device out of his car. He checks the monitor and spots the cops shaking wildly in the distance. He asks the chat for help when someone uploads a video of this old woman. She introduces herself as Hetty and explains that she used to live at the house as a nanny. The woman reveals that Mildred tried to attack her, and she created a ward that kept her from harming anybody else. That's when he switches cameras and sees the undead cop coming his way. Switching back, the woman explains he has to make a new Hamza, but to do that, he needs to sacrifice a piece of flesh. Suddenly, something shakes his car, and Sean realizes that he needs a weapon. Searching the trunk, the man grabs a potato gun, but gets distracted as the terrifying creature bangs on his window. He gets ready to fire, but the creature appears from behind and grabs him before Sean manages to escape its grip and get out of the car. Firing the potato gun through its chest, he blasts a hole through the creature, and its body slides down the barrel of the gun. He checks the tablet to see that the screen is completely cracked, and now he has no way of monitoring his surroundings. Terrified, Sean rushes back into the car, wondering how he managed to reach this point in his life. He decides to write a note down in Mildred's journal and finds a slip of paper with instructions for a ritual. The man reads another part of the journal, which repeats the phrase about pond water, and realizes that Mildred is creating ghosts, forcing them to memorize her poetry. Since her lover was a publisher and no one knew of her writing when she was alive, this is her attempt at creating an audience for her work. He takes another look at the ritual paper, knowing that he needs to translate the Latin to free his soul from this place and steal the ghost's power from her. With a plan in mind, Sean leaves the card, ready to take Mildred on once and for all. He runs back to the house, picking up this log, and breaks the door open. Heading inside, he grabs a stick and moves over to this chair to create himself a ghost hunting arsenal. He takes a silver knife to the stick, soaking it in the juices of the garlic, and creates a spear. Walking into the next room, he takes an empty syringe and fills it full of holy water, giving himself the perfect weapon to purge any evil spirits. Heading to the kitchen, he grabs the butcher knife and goes upstairs to face Mildred. That's when he hears a noise from a side door, but decides to head upstairs anyway. He grabs the bag and walks into a safe room, finding out that he's still streaming. Checking the chat, he sees that his viewers have translated the words on the ritual paper, but he hears a scream and starts on his preparations to beat the spirit. Realizing that he might not make it, he apologizes to his viewers for all his past controversies, confessing that he's done some bad things in the past that he wants to move on from. Okay, at this point, I think I'd want to start praying to baby Jesus for forgiveness. This streamer is going to fight off a bunch of malicious ghosts and conduct a ritual to not only take back his soul, but claim all the power that Mildred has accumulated over the years. One wrong move will get this man killed and become a permanent resident of the Death Manor. It's terrifying, but there might be something else Sean can do to not only save his soul, but steal all of Mildred's power. Since he was cursed by saying the Latin phrase that Mildred made him chant, he might be able to break it by drinking holy water. The reason is that he knows, based on both the ritual paper he found and what the old woman said, that Mildred made a pact with the devil in order to gain power. If Satan is powering this mess in the first place, then a bottle of blessed water might be enough to protect us, just like a Catholic exorcist would use. With that said, trying to take her power by appealing to the devil is not totally unfounded. There are several folktales and stories across mythology that dictates making deals with the devil is a bad idea. Most famously in the story of Faust, where the main character almost gets dragged into hell. It was only thanks to literal divine intervention that he doesn't. And to be honest, I don't think Sean is the most pious person in the world. Regardless, Mildred and the ghost prove the ritual works, so it isn't necessarily a bad idea to try. But there is another option he's forgetting. The old woman Hetty was able to create a hamza that warded off the ghost from entering his safe room, and it worked until he broke it. The woman was actually beginning to give instructions on how to create one before Sean was interrupted by the undead cop shaking the car. She explicitly states that all worthwhile counter vigils require a sacrifice of flesh, and since Mildred had one of her fingers amputated, it would be safe to assume that we'd have to sacrifice even more than that. Since Hetty was 15 years old when she made the original hamza, it probably doesn't require too many things to create a new one, but having to remove 2 fingers is too heavy a cost. That's why if it were me, I'd have gone back to the original plan, which was to find the spark plugs and drive to the hospital. We already know where they are, and a sprinkling of holy water should scare that plant demon off. So as counterintuitive as it might seem, going to get them and installing them back into the car would take less time than traveling by foot to escape the forest. We need as much speed and protection as we can get, so getting the car working is our best and only chance for survival. The man readies his spear and calls out for Mildred to come get him, but nothing happens. He walks out into the hallway and recites some of her poems, hoping to get a reaction. He decides to open the nursery, finding a small child facing the wall. Sean grabs a doll and tries to calm the kid down when suddenly he spots a disfigured creature attached to him. Terrified, he rushes outside, pouring the holy water on the ground. That's when he hears Mildred calling out his name, and the man urges her to come find him, checking his monitor to see the corner man right behind him. The man stabs his spear towards its location, but the ghost steals his weapon. It stabs the man, who tries using garlic to ward the creature off, and realizes it doesn't work. Terrified, he runs to the bathroom where he hears Chrissy's voice begging him for help. Suddenly, the light turns off, and he hears Mildred's voice asking him to meet someone. That's when the lights turn on, and Sean's eyes have glazed over. He's being possessed, and the man realizes he's in the disgusting bathtub, but can't stop himself from reciting that the pond water is still. He tilts forward into the water and comes to his senses, fighting against the possession. Slapping himself in the face, the man breaks out of his trance when a monster emerges from the bathtub and attacks him. Sean quickly comes up with a clever idea and stabs a syringe into its head, injecting it with holy water. He taunts the ghost, but then its head explodes onto his face, and that makes the streamer furious. Climbing out of the bathtub, he checks the monitor to find the hallway empty and throws the journal outside to bait Mildred. He checks the cameras again, and as soon as he sees the book move by itself, the man runs outside to cut off the spirit's hand. But that was his biggest mistake. Looking up at the ceiling, he sees the ghost waiting for him, and she attacks the man, smashing him against the ground. Sean spots the butcher knife and swings it right into the spirit's skull, killing her a second time. With the ghost dealt with, he attaches a camera to Mildred to make sure he can keep tabs on her once she gets back up. He crawls away into his safe room, and moments later, the ghost recovers from her wound. Getting to her feet, she picks up his cassette player and walks into the safe room, spotting the man sitting behind the desk. But that was her biggest mistake. The streamer steps out of the closet and hits her over the head with a chair. He drags her body over the hamza, taping down her arms and covering her mouth before reciting the words to the ritual, but it doesn't work. Suddenly, she takes the tape off and hits Sean in the face, knocking him to the floor. The spirit sticks her finger into the man's nose before beating him up. Fighting back, he rips the tape off her mouth and tears the skin from her mouth. It's horrific, but he manages to push Mildred off of him and weighs her down with a cement block, making sure she can't easily chase after him. He crawls out of the room and heads for the exit, rolling downstairs to escape. It's clear to him that the ghost won't stop coming, and Sean decides to give up, thanking his viewers for all the support. Exhausted, he's startled when he finds the rotten finger from the box and remembers what the old woman told him. The ritual needs a sacrifice of flesh to complete, so Mildred must have cut hers off, meaning he has to do the same thing to claim back his soul. Noticing the ghost crawling towards him, he recites the ritual, and Mildred is dragged away by an unseen force, banished from the material plane. Sean has defeated Mildred, and he picks up his monitor, telling the viewers that they've beaten the Death Manor, but that was his biggest mistake. Suddenly, the other ghosts approach him, determined to get their revenge, and as horrifying as this is, he's learned a valuable lesson. Always bring a priest with you to a haunted house. But what do you think? How would you beat Deadstream? Let me know with a comment down below. Thank you so much for watching, leave a like and subscribe, and check out the How to Beat playlist for more videos like this. Until next time, have a damn good day.